Hello, I'm Evelyn Bouley, an artist, art teacher, and docent volunteer here at the Pearl Fincher Museum of Fine Arts. I have put together some lessons and I'd like to share one of them with you today. This has been inspired by one of the quilts that we have on display. We've had a quilt show here at the Pearl for several months, and there's one that caught my eye immediately because it is so dynamic. It's called Trio by Emily Parson. Emily is a quilt artist who dyes all of her own material, and then she draws the subject, in this case monarch butterflies, and she draws them to scale. She's enlarged them. And then she cuts out her materials and collages them together, and then she adds the batting and the backing and quilts it all together. And this lovely work of art has been ours to share with the public. When I saw this beautiful quilt, it reminded me of something that has been very important to me this past spring. When I was home during the quarantine time and alone a lot, I spent more time than ever out in the garden. That was someplace safe I could still go. And I don't know if it's because I was out more or if it was true, but there seemed to be more monarch butterflies than ever before. They were beautiful and inspirational, and it was quite moving to see them. It gave me hope. And as I would look at their bright colors lined with the black of the outline of the outside of their wings, it looked like the leading of a stained glass window. And I started to think of them, when I spotted them, as tiny flying stained glass windows. So that is what inspired me to come up with this lesson plan, and I hope you enjoy it. I'd like to show you an example of what I have prepared. This is a finished piece right here of some monarch butterflies around some blossoms. And this is using a couple of techniques that I'd like to share called wet on wet and dry brush. This is obviously expressionistic. It is not a realistic, anatomically correct study of the insect, but I think I was going more for the feeling of motion and the movement and the color and really the joy, the feeling that they give you, or they gave me. So that's the kind of project that we're going to do today, very expressionistic. Here's another example. This one is a single monarch, and it's in the middle, very centered in a field of different kind of flowers. This is a grouping of smaller monarch butterflies with a little splatter painting. And this one is one large monarch. I think this might be the very first one I did. And you can see how the colors kind of diffuse and mist into each other. That's an effect that you can only get with wet on wet. So I'll demonstrate that in just a second. Let's talk about the supplies that you will need if you decide to do this project. I was thinking that since so many of us were homebound, that it would be good to find some supplies that were very accessible. And the project does not call for anything really unusual. All you would need, and a lot of you who have art supplies at home probably already have all of this, but all you would need are watercolor paints that are in the tube, 2 watercolor brushes, a large and a small, the numbers are not important, a work area that's covered and protected, paper towels are always a must, water of course, and a palette. I just use disposable paper plates. They work just fine. They get the job done. So with those simple supplies, which are available even at a drugstore or Walmart or certainly at Michael's or Hobby Lobby, you have everything you need to make this project at home. And you can always get these things online, of course. So let me start with our very first step, which is the process of wet on wet. When you have your wet on wet process, you want to work with very loose watercolor. You want it to be very liquidy. This is not supposed to be anything that looks like poster paint. You want it to be very transparent. That's the beauty and the characteristic that watercolorists go for. And the very first thing you'll do is to add some water to your paint. I would suggest that we stick with the warm colors, the yellows, oranges, and reds, because one thing, it's the Monarch butterfly, and another thing, if you are adding any other colors like blues or greens, the complements will mix and the result is often a muddy result. So for starters, let's stick with the warm color schemes. The first thing, after you have created your palette of wet watercolor paint, you're going to put clear water upon your watercolor paper. And it doesn't matter exactly where you put it, it's just a splash of wet paint. I mean, a splash of just plain water. And you want to add enough that it moistens the paper, it's priming it, but we don't want so much that it leaves a puddle. If you're going to work that wet, we would have to tape down your paper. And in this project, that shouldn't be necessary. Then after you have added your plain clear water, you're going to drop in your color. And when I say drop in, I mean you want to just touch it like this, because we don't want to stroke it. If you are adding strokes with your brush, that is going to mix everything. And we don't really want it mixed. We want to let it slowly mist into each other. That's the beauty of this technique. And if you're an art teacher and you're sharing this with your art students, this is going to be very fun for them. This might be their favorite part. The only hard part about this is knowing when to stop. It gets to be so much fun. Okay. Then you can just set that aside to dry. Now, we will have all of the steps that I'm giving you today all written out in a lesson plan and online. So it'd be very easy for you to just watch this, but then go back and refer to that written out for you. Also, I have made about 8, maybe 9 different templates of Monarch butterflies. I drew them in all different positions, all different sizes, and those are also available for you online. So you would need to just look at those and pick whichever one you like and print it off. And then you will use it to create the delineation of your butterfly on top of the colors that you've painted. If you don't want to use mine, please feel free to draw your own Monarch butterfly. There's a lot of pictures of them online, and you can get a good view of what they look like. Remember, they're like tiny stained glass windows. Now, after this has a chance to dry, and I have this one that is already dry, we're going to transfer your template. And you will use a piece of tape just to secure it so it doesn't misregister, and line it up. Before you do that, the transfer technique I'm going to share with you is very simple. Use a number 2 pencil, or you can use an ebony, anything that has soft lead, and you shade on the back of where the butterfly is. You don't have to shade the whole paper, just shade where the butterfly is. After you've done that, position it where you want it, like I said, secure it with the tape, and you begin to trace out this template, this pattern, and you're drawing on either side of the outlines. either side of the pattern, that black leading look. Looks like the leading of the stained glass. And then as you trace that out, you can pick it up to make sure that it's making a good transfer. And it will look like you drew it entirely just with pencil. Here's one that is completed. Now we're going to do the next step. And this is another technique. It's called dry brush. Dry brush is when you are using a concentrated amount of paint, less water, more pigment. You don't want, in dry brush, you don't want a transparent look. You want it to be opaque. So this time, you'll use your small brush, and I found this to be very therapeutic, this part. I just used my brush and filled in that area that I had previously traced. And you're just thinking about completing the black outlines. And as you complete it, the lovely butterfly appears. There's some serendipity to this. You really don't know what colors will be trapped where until you're totally finished. And that's part of the fun of this project too. And then when you have it totally painted in, here's one that was in progress, and here's one that is complete. Now, it's time for you to make it your own. You can either leave it just like this, or you can add some details. You might want to splatter paint it, like I said, right here that I had done, or you might want to add some background. You could use the wet on wet to add blossoms around it using the same technique, only you would vary your colors. And then when that dries, you would go back and use the dry brush to create some defining lines in there that make it look more like flowers. And then something that I did that I think made a little bit of difference when it was totally dry, I went back with a fine tip marker and added some fine, intricate details. And I think that gave it some interest. I'm glad I did that. Little antenna on the butterflies and things in the flowers too. So whatever you do, feel free to change it up and make it your own. Make it something that looks like yours and yours alone. You might be using this technique and this process that I presented with you, but use that as a springboard. Go forward with it and have fun with it. Whether you're viewing art or making art, it's going to enrich your life. So until I see you again, have fun, and I hope to see you at the Pearl. Thank you.